tomar seu café, você tá atrasada.
Disseram que a minha filha com 8 anos ia ter caído na vida. Disseram que ela ia passar o dia todo metida na embarcação. E que ela não tinha escolha. Apostaram que ela ia engravidar assim muito com 12 anos. Disseram que ela não tinha que estar sonhando. Não importa o que me disseram, eu escolhi outra história para chamar de nossa.
A cada ano, cerca de 500 mil de crianças e adolescentes são explorados sexualmente no Brasil. E sabe, isso não acontece só aqui na Amazônia. Proteja sua filha. Diga não à exploração sexual infantil.
Thank you, everybody, for such a lovely welcome. I appreciate all that's gone into bringing me here, because when I originally got the email, I thought, I can't go to Brazil. I just can't. And then I have to say, Luciana is very persuasive, and I got a second email, and of course, and so thank you very much. I have to apologize beforehand for some of the language that I'm going to be using. It's not pleasant, but it has to be real, because we're talking about a global health crisis for women. And there's no way you can sugarcoat this. You have to speak the truth of what is going on. And the reason we have to speak the truth of what is going on is because we have to raise awareness, because the adults in the world have to stand up, adult up, and make a brave and bold statement on behalf of children. That is our job as adults. And so what I'm going to do is take you through what is going on and happening to women and children. Because remember, whatever happens to children happens to women as well. The reason children are in the situation they're in is because women are so demeaned and degraded in this society. So I'm going to be talking about that as well. So excuse me while I get some water. So again, I apologize for my language. I'm not going to apologize for the images because I didn't produce them, the porn industry did. So all your rage at the images, please do not direct at me, direct at the porn industry, okay? And I will help you to direct it, so don't worry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about what is going on in our culture and the way in which very few people understand. And because these are in Portuguese, I'm going to have to read it off my English. I don't speak Portuguese. So, what I want to talk about to begin with is how wherever I go and lecture, and whether it is governments, whether it is pediatricians, whether it is teachers, social workers, wherever I go, what I tell them is new. And I want to say to them, this shouldn't be new. You should be saying, I have heard this over and over again. Why does it take me and my organization, Culture Reframed, to introduce you to the world that children are now living in? Now, the problem with this is that although those who are tasked with taking care of children do not know the world that kids live in today, do not understand the way that kids are drowning in a pornographic culture, the media understand very well. And they use it and they exploit it. So I want to give you an example from Details magazine. Now, Details it's like Cosmopolitan for boys. You get that? Sort of a kind of pseudo-fashion, serious articles that aren't serious at all, okay? So, this is an article from Details, and it's called How Internet Porn is Changing Teen Sex. And what they said is interesting. They interviewed a woman who is called Joanna Angel, who is a pornographer. There are some women who are pornographers. Mainly it's men. The vast majority of producers, directors, consumers, and who make money from it are men, and sadly, consumers' boys as well, which we're going to talk about the impact on boys. But what they said is very interesting. What Joanna Angel said as she said, the girls these days, they seem to come to the set porn ready. Now, what does that mean, porn ready? So how many of you here have daughters? Okay, so my assumption is that your daughters are not going to end up on a porn set. True? Would you all, most of you will agree. That's not likely, right? Who ends up on porn sets are normally daughters of poor women, often poverty-stricken, and these will do anything to feed their children. Women will do anything to feed their children, and if that means being in pornography and prostitution, and I have to say as a mother, I too, if I was poverty-stricken, would have done what it takes to put food on the table for my kid. So what they said is very interesting. She said they come to the set porn ready. So even though your daughters or granddaughters or all the young girls you know are not going to end up on a porn set, that does not mean they are not all being socialized to be porn ready. What she's actually saying is that girls are being socialized to think of themselves in a pornographic way. And this has a profound impact in bringing girls into trafficking, bringing them into prostitution, pornography. It gets girls to think of themselves as sex objects. And I'm going to be talking about that as I go along. So I want us to think about what kind of world our girls live in. And I want us first to say, so those of us who are over the age of about 35, and I'm being nice here, okay, about 35, we were born in a print-based culture where the dominant form of communication was the printed word. Our younger generation is born in an image-based culture. Very, very different. Now, when we were brought up in a print-based culture, we developed some immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the printed word. Does everyone understand this? Is everyone? We have no such immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the image. Images pull us in because they bypass our frontal lobes, the executive part of our brain, which is the adult part. Images work very differently on the brain than print. Now, I know how that works because I have a PhD in sociology. I have studied media all my life. I know every trick in the book that they use, all the way that they airbrush women's images, the way in which none of these women are real. I know all of this. And yet, when I was looking at Cosmopolitan, I was going through 10 years of Cosmopolitan for when I was writing my book, Pornland. And I'm going through it, and I'm going, I hate it, I hate it, I want to look like that, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. It was affecting me. And then I got to think, if it affects me, who has studied this industry, understands the way in which all of these women are not real, are airbrushed, what does it mean if you're 13 years old and you're developing your sense of what it means to be male or female in this culture? How can you engage in a critical way with the image? And in fact, the truth is you can't, because images never lie. Even when they lie, they don't lie, because they somehow tell the truth. And I'll do a little experiment a bit later on for the women to just show you how images, even when they lie, tell the truth. So I sort of went through some of the images that are popular in Brazil and the United States, just to give you a sense of what our young girls are growing up with. Now, this is, by the way, a mainstream cosmopolitan image. 15 years ago, this would have been Playboy, am I right? Not anymore. These are all mainstream images. The Kardashians, are they famous in Brazil? All right, so first of all, the Kardashians are not a family. They are a global corporation. You get that? Very different concept. One of the Kardashian sisters, when she went on Instagram and said that she probably wasn't going to post a selfie anymore, do you know the shares in Instagram dropped? That's how powerful the Kardashians are. So, and I always say to my students, do you really need any more evidence that we are a culture in free fall when the fact that the Kardashians are the most famous people in the world? Any more evidence? And what are they famous for? Being famous. That's it. Nothing else. And so when we think about what does it mean now, I also want to think about how social media has shifted what it means to be human. Right? I have 5,000 Facebook friends. I don't know them. I know some of them, but a few. But what is a friend? A friend is somebody you look across the table from over a cup of coffee, and eye-to-eye contact, someone you speak to and you know. The whole concept of how we communicate as human beings has shifted dramatically to social media. How many of you have been out in restaurants and watched people out and everyone is on their phone? I mean, this is crazy, right? You're out. I took a friend out to a restaurant for her birthday. Very, very expensive restaurant. And I look around and they bring the food. No one's eating. Guess what they're doing? They're taking pictures of the food. Right? $100 a plate food, getting cold, and everyone's taking pictures and uploading it onto social media. Or my students would write, off 11 a.m., off to Starbucks for coffee. Who cares? Really, who cares? But God forbid you have an inner life. God forbid you have something in here that you don't share with the rest of the world. So I really want us to think about how we are shifting our younger generation as well. Because to be famous today is to be documented. Nobody shows this better than the Kardashians. And I'll give you an example. When I was going shopping, and my son was small, right? And I'm in a supermarket, and I'd just been on television in an interview. And I'm wearing like sneakers, jeans, my son's running around and I'm grabbing him like you do when they're young. And this woman comes up to me, she says, "You're a film star, aren't you?" I said, "No." And if I was a film star, do you think I'd be doing my own shopping in the local supermarket? But you see how it all gets locked into this mush of imagery. So I really want us to begin to think the way in which we are reshaping what it means to be human. We often talk about the content of social media, but we don't talk about what it actually means as a human experience. So just to carry on going through the images that you see, everybody knows who this is, yes? Is there anyone in Brazil who does not? Everyone in the United States knows who this is, of course. And I want you to think about what it means to be 13, 12, 11, a girl, figuring out who you are in the world. What does it mean to be a girl? Because this is about the age in which you begin to develop your gender identity. And how do you develop your gender identity? You develop it through the social cues coming at you. You look around and you think, what does it mean? Now, who produces the most profound and the most articulate and the most direct social cues about what it means to be female? The media. They have a power that they have never had before to determine the nature of who we are as human beings. And especially when it comes to thinking about what it means to be a girl and what it means to a boy. Now, this is perfectly normal. What I'm going to be talking about are perfectly normal developmental levels of becoming male and female. What happens is the porn culture comes in and makes it an unhealthy development. It hijacks the natural development of our young people. And I will not put that on the shoulders of young people. This goes on the shoulders of the media industry, the porn industry, the sex trafficking industry, and it should be on our shoulders to do something as well as adults. So again, images. Do you all recognize these images? I hope you do. I hope I picked the right images for Brazilian women. And again, bits and pieces. Notice how often we see bits and pieces of women. And what happens is you lose the sense of yourself as a whole human being. How many women here in the morning, after you've taken a shower, you look in the mirror and you rip yourself into bits and pieces? This needs work, everything needs work, am I right? Maybe there's one part of you like, if you're lucky. But on the whole, most of us, as women, learn to hate ourselves bodily. Who would agree? Put your hands up if you agree. Right, okay, so let's be honest. Now, you know why? Because when you think about it, what would happen tomorrow to global capitalism if women woke up and said, you know what, I like myself. I look really good. We'd stop buying all that crap we buy. Could you imagine how many of you, as women, have enough clothes in your wardrobe to last till you're 150 years old? That doesn't mean to say you're not going to go shopping tomorrow. So what happens is the more we hate ourselves as women, the more we think we're fat, we're ugly, we're all of these things, the more money we spend. And then think of all the industries that rely on this, not just the fashion industry, all the clothing industry, the fabric producing industry, the makeup industry. Just think of all of those people who are employed in order to feed this desire that we hate ourselves. And you know what? And I'm sure many of you women can really relate to this. And I'll talk about men a bit later and how they're taught to hate themselves. But for women, when you really don't feel great and you go out and you buy maybe a new lipstick, you feel better. Am I right? For 10 minutes. And then guess what? You have to go out and buy again, and again, and again, and again. And what's interesting is that it's mainly wealthier women who buy this. And who's making all of this? Poor women. So we're creating a massive economic divide between poor women in developing countries who produce the products for wealthier women to consume. So really, a lot of this is on the backs of poverty-stricken women in developing countries. They make the products. That's why we can afford them. If you had to pay everybody a living wage in the whole value chain from start to finish, do you think we could all afford all these lipsticks and makeup and hair? No, we couldn't. Right? So this is why we depend on women being paid poverty and children. So just going through the image-based culture. Now, in the United States, we don't tend to have many women of color in the media. We have a few. Beyoncé is one example. But it's in the United States especially, it's a very white beauty standard. Now, I want to give an example of how images work. So this is Victoria's Secret. So take a close look at this image. And this is not one woman, okay? This is probably 6 women, one woman's legs, one woman's arms. Notice, by the way, they've put the stomach in the wrong place. But who cares, you know? I mean, if you look nice, who cares where your stomach is? So they've put her stomach in the wrong place. Now, I am telling you, she is not real. She does not exist, right? She's not real. How many women still, as I am saying to you, she is not real, you are still looking at her, you still think you're a fat pig, and you still think you need to go on a diet, even as I'm saying she's not real. Come on, how many of you? Because it doesn't matter what I'm saying, because my voice is bypassing your frontal lobes, and this is what is impacting you. And so, again, what we've never discussed is what does it mean to bring up kids in an image-based culture? Do you know, as a university professor, when I would teach incoming students their first year, do you know sometimes the first book they'd ever read from start to finish was in my class at 18? Can you imagine that? That you'd never read a book from start to finish till you're 18. What does that mean about how you develop as a human being? How you develop knowledge? How you know about the world? They'd read Cosmopolitan from start to finish, but never anything with any substance in it. And I found that all the time. And also, I have to say, over my 30 years of being a college professor, what I noticed was how my students' ability to write was going down. Any college professors in the room here? See the same thing, that their capacity to write goes down, and even to understand concepts is going down and down. And that, one of the reasons for that is if you're on social media and you do an emoji and a smiley face, well, how are you going to take that and then understand a difficult concept that's in printed word? So we, again, are shifting the capacity for our students to learn. So I want to teach some media theory. And again, I'm going to ask you to excuse my language, but it is important because it explains how it works. Okay, so all images, in media theory, we have a concept called the reader inscribed in the text, which means that every single image has a reader in mind, a viewer. So let's look at her. Let's look at her body language, what she's wearing, and let's ask, who is she speaking to? And before you answer, do you think she's speaking to a mother saying, let's go for a cup of coffee after the photo shoot? So who's she speaking to? Men, okay. So do we all agree that this is the look of speaking to men? And what is she saying? What is that look saying? Fuck me, exactly, okay? So this look is saying, fuck me, come get me. It's a look of sexual vulnerability. You get that? Now, what I would do in my classes is I would make 3 young female students stand up, and they would do the fuck me look. And they would know exactly how to do it. I didn't have to explain it, you know. Then the really interesting thing is over here, I would have 3 male students. And we'd get up here and we'd say, okay, do the fuck me look. And they'd stand around like this. And we'd have to explain to them, put your hand on your hip, you know, stick out your chest, neck up, which, by the way, what does this always symbolize when your neck's up? Vulnerability. You understand? How do animals signal to each other that they give up? Through the neck up, which is a standard image for women. So then we'd have the 3 men, and we'd eventually teach them how to do the fuck me look, and the 3 women. And what would be really interesting is the women would look completely normal, right? We've seen it everywhere. The men would look ridiculous, ridiculous. So the question becomes, and now it gets not so funny, why is it normal for women to say, come get me, I'm vulnerable, but why is it not normal for us to see men in that position? Because what makes women hot in our culture is sexual vulnerability. What makes men hot is not sexual vulnerability. It's not fuck me. What is it? Fuck you, right? It's an aggressive, assertive, angry image. That's what makes men hot, which is why when we study rape, we have to understand, and this really hurts me to say this, men who rape are not deviants. They are over-conformists. They over-conform to the sexual messages and the visual messages. And as a sociologist, my interest is not the men who rape. I understand this from the culture because we live in what we call a rape culture. I want to know why the men who don't rape. What have you had? They're called protective factors in public health. What were the factors that stopped you as a male picking up all the messages that have been thrown at you? Now, before I go any further, I'm going to have to address an issue. Feminists are often called man-haters. Is that true in Brazil? Okay. I want to say something very important. Feminists are men's best friends. We have been fighting for men's humanity more than any group ever have fought for men's humanity. You know why? Because we do not believe that men are born rapists. We do not believe that men are born Johns. We do not believe they are born pimps or batterers. We do not believe that. You know what we believe as feminists? That men are born fully equal to women. Now, how's that for a radical statement? All right? Now, when we say boys will be boys, and I'm going to talk about this with trafficking and pornography, but especially trafficking, because I want to ask you a question to think about. When men go to traffic children, and they walk in and they see a child who looks beyond wretched, you understand, beyond wretched, how do they still have an erection? Because if I went in to a brothel and saw a child, what would I want to do? What would you want to do? Drag that child out as quick as possible, feed it, and protect it. The last thing on my mind would be sex. The very, very, very last thing. It would be protection. So the question becomes, how is it possible that men can go to trafficked women and children? Now, you have 2 answers to that. Either biology, that men are born that way, which means there's something wrong with them, or a cultural answer, which means that we socialize them into desensitization to pain. And I am going to tell you, as a sociologist, as a feminist, but more profoundly than anything, as a mother of a son, do not tell me my child lacks the capacity for intimacy, connection, and love. The culture says he does, But I refused to accept that. I saw my beautiful little boy, and it was perfect. And if my son is born with all the capacity for humanity, I bet your sons are as well. Am I right? So when you hear that feminists are man-haters, no. You know who really hate men? The pornographers. The pornographers say that men are life support systems for erect penises. Is that true? Of course it's not. My son is not a life support, and I have to introduce my dear husband over here, who is definitely not a life support system for an erect penis, who is a full human being, who has stood by me for, 30, 40 years, God knows, right? So many years, and who has made it possible for me to do this work, and has shown that men can stand behind women, they can stand behind them, and in front of them, and by the side of them when they need them. But the most important thing for me as the mother of a son is understanding the full capacity of boys. And I refuse to accept that somehow boys are born lesser. Do you all agree? Yes. So this is a really crucial concept to get out there in the beginning. So I've got to see where I put my... Where did my clicker go? Oh, thank you, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so let's continue with what happens. So this is the choice we give our girls now. So the choice we give them is they are either fuckable or invisible. You get that concept? Fuckability versus invisibility for young girls. Now this is very important because what it tells us is that we are forcing our girls to conform to a hypersexualization that they did not create, that is not healthy, and that is not authentic or real for them. They are being forced to conform to a hypersexualization that is being forced on them by this culture. And when we see, and I saw a picture, who was that girl you showed me yesterday who was 12 years old? I couldn't believe what I saw yesterday. I have to tell you, in the United States, that image of a hypersexualized 12-year-old, and believe me, we've got no heaven in the United States in that way, right? But we would not allow that image. That would be considered child pornography. What you have as mainstream in this culture, we would not allow. So this is what, now what does it mean to see this young girl, 12 years old, walking around like this in the media and all the other girls? What choice does she have when she sees that that's what it means to be visible? When she's wearing, the crop tops, the low-slung jeans, the pierced belly button, the mesh tops. How can you ask a 12-year-old girl to be invisible? Now, when I go and lecture in schools to high schoolers, I speak to girls and boys, and girls come up to me, a few of them, and they say, I'm invisible. I'm one of those invisible girls, and I'm alone, and I'm isolated, and I've got no friends. But I can't be fuckable. It's not who I am. So they do exist. There are girls who absolutely resist. But it is so much to ask, because you know what? At that age, that is when the peer group takes over. That is when, now for those of you who are bringing up teenagers, do you remember the worst thing in the world was to come home with the wrong pair of jeans? Do you remember how they had to look like everybody else? This is built into the DNA of adolescence, that I want to be like everyone else. So if you have a culture where you have got all young girls looking hypersexualized, what do you expect? And then we get to a situation where if you go into a department store or a boutique, watch a 12-year-old buying a dress with her mother. It's like a third world war in there. She comes out in this dress. The mother wants to die on the spot, right? Because the kid is 12 and looks 19, 20. Now, and then this fight starts. So why? The kid wants to look like her friends. She's right. The mother wants to protect the kid. She's right. So you understand, this is a no-win situation. Everybody's right. Because you can't blame the kid for wanting to look like that, and you can't blame the mother for wanting to say, I need to protect you. You're a kid, you're not an adult woman, but you look like an adult woman. And so we have made it almost impossible to parent. I want to make that perfectly clear. I am so happy my son is in his 30s. I couldn't imagine what it is like now. Who are young parents now? Who are parenting kids between the ages of 9 to about 15? Is your life just really difficult? Yeah. It's just, they have made it so, and you know what? Parenting is difficult enough. It is the most humbling experience you will ever do. And now layer on the porn culture. And you've made it 20 times more difficult. So to give you an example of fuckability versus invisibility, I want to talk about Miley Cyrus. So she was popular here, yes? So Hannah Montana. So first of all, we don't know Miley Cyrus. She's a Disney commodity. You understand that? She was owned by Disney. She was sold by her parents from the age of 7 to Disney. Her parents never worked. They lived off her. And I don't know if you know this, but all the Disney kids, they never grow into a healthy adulthood, right? Does not end well for these kids, never. Anyway, so Miley Cyrus is a multi-billion-dollar Disney commodity. And then she turns 16. And they have to rebrand her. So they have to go from squeaky clean Miley Cyrus, Hannah Montana, to fuckable Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus. Now this was when she was 16. Now, after seeing what your images of 12-year-old look like, this is nothing, okay? But in the United States, this was huge. This was in Vanity Fair. This was shot by Annie Leibovitz. People know Annie Leibovitz, the photographer? And there was an uproar. And then this, that was with her father. Would you like to sit like this with your father? I know I wouldn't, okay? Then these were all the same images. So afterwards, what happened is parents went mad and said, my daughter loves Hannah Montana, and you're making her look, quote, slutty. Do you have that word here, slutty? Yeah. So what they did, and this is really interesting, 16-year-old Miley Cyrus was forced to hold a press conference and apologize. Now, do you think for 1 minute Miley Cyrus sat down and wrote the trajectory of her career? This was done by adults selling Miley Cyrus. Yet when it came to take the blame, guess who they pushed out? Miley Cyrus. She said, I'm sorry, I'll never do this again. 1 year later, we get this in Elle. And then the twerking image. Do you remember the twerking image? Now, the day after, so who remembers this? Okay, let me explain it to those who don't. This was at the Music Awards. And this is a song by Robin Thicke. Robin Thicke singing a song of a rapist. I know you want it, I know you want it, I know you want it. It's like he's raping her and he's singing, oh, this is what rapists say, I know you wanted it. And in fact, when my students would hear this song who'd been raped, they got triggered, you know, upset because it reminded them. Anyway, so this is it. And he is pushing his penis into her. It's all over American television. The next day, everybody is talking about what a slut Miley Cyrus is. Nobody is saying, what is wrong with Robin Thicke, a man twice her age with 2 children, doing that? Nobody talked about Robin Thicke. Notice how we always blame the girls. And that leads to self-loathing on the part of girls, which again, the more self-loathing you give them, the more porn-ready you're getting them. Now, this is Miley Cyrus in São Paulo. Okay, she's pretty popular here. So, let me just catch up where I am here with my English ones. So what does all of this mean? What does it mean, what is going on with our culture? So, when I was making a documentary about 10 years ago, we were trying to figure out what has happened in the culture. Because those of us who taught young women in colleges and universities, we could feel a change in them. There was a shift. And I was trying to articulate what was that shift. And actually, during the filming of the documentary, we had to turn it off because we couldn't figure it out. And then a few months later, I got told exactly what it was. And it wasn't somebody with a PhD in media. It wasn't someone with a PhD in sociology. It was an incarcerated child rapist. So let me tell you how I end up in a prison talking to 8 child rapists, okay? So in the United States, the major colleges, Yale, Harvard, they have a thing called Sex Week. Now, there would be nothing wrong with Sex Week if they were teaching about healthy relationships, healthy sexuality, pleasure, all of those things. But no, you know what happens? The porn industry runs Sex Week. So at Yale, they move to Connecticut, the porn industry comes in for a week and sets up all these events. And the last night, they hire a bar in downtown New Haven, which is where Yale is, and they do tryouts for the next porn film with Yale students. Right, this is at Yale, and it's at Harvard. So I wrote an op-ed, an article, in the newspaper saying this is outrageous. How dare you let the pornographers onto a college campus? A college campus is a place of intellectual learning, not a place to sell your students to the pornographers. So what happened is that, and there's a funny story here that I have to say. So of course everyone at Yale hated me, okay, all the students. And then the next year I get a phone call, and it was the head of Sex Week. And they said, we'd like you to come and talk. I thought, this is weird. I've just spent last year writing about how awful it is, and all of a sudden, they're calling me. So I'm trying to think, you know, when your mind's going click, 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 what's going on? And it suddenly dawned on me. Yale was being sued for rape and sexual harassment. What had happened was that male students at Yale had surrounded the women's center, right, where women live, and they were shouting, no means yes, and yes means anal. You got that? And the women were scared. It was midnight. They called the campus police. At the same time, one of their most famous philosophers was being sued for sexually harassing women, his students, over a 20-year period. Right? This is common all over the United States. It might be happening here, I don't know, but professors, male professors, going after young students. Anyway, so I'm beginning to realize, oh, the president of Yale has said no to Sex Week unless you bring somebody in who's anti-porn. Me. So I'm realizing the whole of Sex Week depends on me saying yes, right? So then I said, they said, we'd like you to speak on a panel for 10 minutes. No, you need me. So I said, well, actually, I don't do panels, I'm sorry. If you want me to speak at Sex Week, you have to give me an hour and a half lecture. Then I'll speak on the panel, but first, you have to, because I want to speak to the students, you understand? I wanted to get them to understand what was going on. So of course I knew they couldn't say no, and I said, and I want a big donation to my organization, Culture Reframed. I got everything I asked for, okay? Everything. So, and it was very interesting because I did get to speak to the students at Yale. And they heard it, a lot of it. They still had Sex Week, the pornographer still came in, but this is how you do social change. You chip away bit by bit. You know, when you're younger, you want to change the world and you want to change it tomorrow. The beauty of age is you realize is what you sow now will be seen in the future. That is the beauty of age, is that I can wait because I'm doing work now that will come to fruition later on. So anyway, so I spoke at Sex Week, and then I got an invitation to go to Connecticut State Prison to interview child rapists. So the head of Rehabilitation Services of Connecticut, which is a state in the US, called me and she said, I run the groups where men who are child rapists go to therapy. And all they talk about is their pornography use. All they talk about is how they love pornography. Would you like to come in and interview them? I said, absolutely. So I end up in a maximum security prison in Connecticut. And I'm sitting with 8 men. Now, every single one of them was in for downloading child porn And then, between 6 months to a year after the first downloading of child porn, he had raped a child. Okay, so these were the men I'm sitting with. And they had no reason to lie. Their sentences were given, they were getting out. So what was interesting was, first of all, every single one of them was a porn addict. Every single one. And now, this is where it's difficult to understand. Not one of them was a pedophile. Do you understand that? You now have non-pedophile men. You all know what pedophiles are. These are men who diagnostically have a whole sort of profile. They usually start offending against kids when they're around 13 or 14. They prefer to have rape children. They don't want sex with adults. They often marry women who have got children, so they have access to the children, right? They're often things like school coaches, teachers. They get jobs where they can be near children. None of this is accidental. This has all been studied. Now, none of these men were pedophiles. You know why? They had never touched a kid till their 40s. And I believe them, because I said to them, "Are you pedophiles?" And they were insulted. And they said, "Of course we're not. We prefer sex with adult women." So I said, "Well, why did you rape a child?" And you know what they said? "We got bored. We wanted something different to all the whores and the sluts in porn. We wanted innocence." This is what they said. They got bored, so rape a child. So then one of them, who was in for raping his 10-year-old stepdaughter, he said to me, he said, "The culture did a lot of the grooming for me." And that was when light bulbs went off in my head. And what I suddenly realized is, you all know what the concept of grooming is. I'll explain it. When there is a predator, pedophile or any predator who wants to batter a woman or rape a child, you pick your kid very carefully. They often come from poverty or a broken home, they're depressed, they're miserable, often they're ill, sick, or they've not been shown much love. And then what you start to do is you start to buy them gifts, you tell them how great they are, you don't touch them, you build a relationship. And then when that kid is connected to you, and then you start to tell them how pretty they are, or how good looking, and how hot, and then you go in for the kill with the rape. And he said to me, this man who had groomed his stepdaughter, he stopped himself and he said, "The culture did a lot of the grooming." And that's when it hit me. The culture we live in is perpetrating against our kids. We live in a mass grooming culture. Does this make sense, what I'm saying? A mass grooming culture where they are training our girls, and to a lesser extent, but also our boys, into thinking themselves as only about sex. And when he said that, it suddenly made so much sense. And then I remembered, what did Joanna Angel say? The girls, they come to the set porn ready. It's the same thing. He's saying the same thing. The culture is making our kids, our girls, porn ready. So this is the situation we now face, is a mass perpetrating culture grooming en masse our children. Now we have to get into the impact of the digital culture. So, have you got a phone handy, David? As a prop. I usually bring my props with me. Thank you. So, if you ever thought as a parent you had any power, this took it all away. You understand that? I speak a lot in LA, and often to very wealthy people in Beverly Hills. And they always say the same thing: we live in a bubble, our kids are safe. No, they're not, right? Fooling themselves. Money does not buy you protection, because now we have changed the world with this. And guess which industry developed the cell phone screen? Where do you think that came from? The porn industry. The porn industry is one of the biggest single drivers of new technology. Every year in Las Vegas is the biggest porn convention in the world. And every January, 10,000 porn fans and me go to Las Vegas to go to the porn convention. And you know, as the porn convention is going on, do you know what's going on downstairs? The biggest electronics conference. It's almost the same industry. Pornography has driven technology. Technology has driven pornography. It is a symbiotic relationship, and I'll explain that more. This has changed it. So let me explain now the life of kids in a digital, because you cannot understand what's going on until you get there. So, of course, the cell phone, the smartphone, shifted everything. And this is true in all communities, everywhere. And I want to give you an example in one of the communities I work in, which is in the religious Jewish communities in Israel. In Israel, they have something called a kosher phone. Do you know what the word kosher means? A kosher phone is what they give the religious boys because it has no pictures on it. But now they're getting smartphones. So guess what they're finding? They're looking at the young religious boys, right, who have no context for understanding this, because you're not even meant to touch a woman in religious Jewish circles, let alone watch pornography. So what this has done is shifted that. True in India as well. Do you remember that terrible case in India where that girl was raped to death? Do you remember that? Where they took a bus? Well, when they downloaded the phones of the rapists, guess what they found? All American-made porn. This is all American-made porn in the United States. There is no such thing as geographical barriers anymore. We live in a global world, especially when it comes to pornography. So let's talk about what has happened here with the phones. So first of all, just some statistics about who uses what. So 76% of teens are on Instagram, 75% Snapchat, and of course they're not on Facebook. You know why the kids are not on Facebook? Because we are. That's why. They don't want to be anywhere near us, and not so much on Twitter. So first of all, Snapchat and Instagram are the two main platforms for teens. And when you download it, in America, it has T for teen, which means it's teen safe. So I speak to parents all over the world who say, yeah, my kids have Snapchat, they have Instagram, it's for teens. Let me show you what's on Snapchat and Instagram. So again, some more statistics about what's going on. So on Instagram, 800 million active users, 40 billion pictures uploaded. You understand it's like the Wild West. You can't possibly control that amount of content. And it's mainly a female platform. Now, what is the main image on Instagram and Snapchat? Any guess? Selfies. Okay, I have a question. Does anyone in the audience remember when you used to take pictures of other people? Do you remember those days? Right, now let me ask you a question. How crazy is this? Now, you know there's never, for young women, never a good enough selfie. You always could look hotter, more sexualized. My students tell me they take selfie after selfie after selfie. We are bringing up a generation of girls who are voyeuristically obsessed with how they look in a very unhealthy way. You should not be this focused on your own body. You should live in your body as your body, not as something to show the rest of the world. It should be something you do sports in, you have fun in, not something that you advertise constantly. So the selfie is the main image. So some statistics on selfies. So 74% of Snapchat photos are selfies. 74%. 1,000 selfies posted on Instagram every second. 19 out of 20 teens have taken a selfie. 93 million selfies taken every day. Right? Do you all understand this is a crazy world we're living in, where you are so obsessed with your body? Now, what do we know about the impact? What does the research show? Excuse me, I have to keep going to my glasses, but I can't read the Portuguese. Right, so there was this report done by the American Psychological Association, which is the official body of all psychologists in the United States. And they did what is called a meta-analysis. And in a meta-analysis, what you do is you kind of go in and you look at all the research and you do a summary. So this is a summary of thousands and thousands of studies. And what they found is that the more girls obsess about what they look like, the more depressed, the more anxious, the more likely they are to drop out of school, the more likely they are to take drugs. They become self-sexualizers. They self-objectify. And think about this, when you self-objectify, you lose a sense of who you are. Because what happens is you don't think of who am I, you think of who do they think I am. You see the difference in that? That's a profound difference, is constantly asking, who do people think I am? So, what we also know from the Royal Society for Public Health is that Instagram causes the most anxiety and depression, and something else called fear of missing out, FOMO. Has anyone heard of FOMO? Okay, what that means is that you think something's happening and you're not included. So you're constantly checking your phone. Now, let me say something. Do you all remember when we went to school as kids and how you'd have like bullying and schools would be difficult? At least you got to go home. You got to close the door and breathe away from it. Today, you don't get to breathe. That follows you home. And how many of you who are bringing up kids are constantly saying to your kid, get off the phone, get off the phone, come and have dinner, do your homework, get off the phone? Because this is constantly what they're looking at to see the degree to which they are being ranked or talked about or maybe bullied. So kids are glued to their phone. Now, what you might not know is a whole other area. So these are gateways to pornography. So now I'm going to tell you something that's going to shock you, okay? Especially the parents. So let's begin going back to details. And this is the same article. And what they said in this, I'm going to read it. He said, there is an entire generation of young people who think sex ends with a money shot to the face. Who knows what a money shot is? Put your hand up if you know what a money shot is. The rest of you don't know what a money shot is? Okay. It is ejaculation on the face. So the standard porn image today is men ejaculating on women's faces to the point that they cannot open their eyes. They've got so much ejaculate. And do you know what one of the STDs, the sexually transmitted diseases, are that are going around the porn industry today in LA? Gonorrhea of the eye. Right? Has anyone ever heard of gonorrhea of the eye? And it is antibiotic resistant. So we have real serious problems, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. So there was a study done in 5 universities, and they asked the incoming first-year male students, what are the 3 sex acts that are your favorite? Now, these are students. What was number 1? Guess. The money shot coming on a face. Guess what number 2 was? Who can guess? Anal sex. Reason being, in pornography, anal sex has replaced vaginal sex. And the third one was threesomes, all straight out of porn. So when I was growing up, if a man I was dating would have said to me, can I ejaculate on your face? I would have thought he was a psychopath. You understand? I would have ran a mile away. Who asked for such things? Today, my students tell me it is perfectly normalized. In fact, I had one student who started to date other student, and he said to her, this is what he said. He said, before we get serious, I have a deal breaker. You know what deal breaker is, yeah? You need to let me come on your face, ejaculate on your face. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. He wouldn't date her. Now, I was telling a journalist in America from the BBC about this, and she was in her 40s. She was doing a documentary on pornography. And she said to me, I don't believe you. You're exaggerating. And her 23-year-old assistant turns around and says, do you know how many men have ejaculated on my face? So this is a world, again, how many of the older people here knew this is standard going on? Right? Is this new to most of you? Right, so this is the world our kids are living in. And as adults, we don't know how to help them navigate because we don't know the world. So this is why it is so important for us to understand their world. So the problem, as well, is from a study from the University of Iowa, was that the University of Indiana, is they did a study on parents, and they found that most parents of kids do not know what pornography is today. When you ask them what it is, and this happens to me all the time in my lectures, they give you an image of 20 years ago, Playboy, like a woman with no clothes on in a cornfield. If you're thinking that's pornography, forget it. Forget it. That's gone, finished, dead. The other thing is, most parents underestimate what their kids are watching by a factor of 10. Right? So now, this is where we have a public health crisis. We have pornography as the public health crisis of the digital age, and we have parents and teachers and adults who don't know what's going on. You understand? This is a crisis because we can't help our children. So this is why it is so important to educate parents, professors, pediatricians, nurses, teachers, what's going on. So let's talk about the law in Brazil. So if there's any lawyers in the room, correct me, but I was looking to see what your law is around pornography. And what I could find was this. And a lot of it was in Portuguese, so this was the English bit. So if this is out of date, let me know. But the law in Brazil is that magazines and DVD covers that depict genitalia must not be visible in public view, and pornography can only be sold to people 18 or older. Is that still true? Okay. So let me tell you, that law belongs in the Stone Age. You are 25 years out of date. Let me tell you why. Number one, there are no DVD or magazines anymore. So who cares, right? Where are all the kids getting their porn from? Not DVDs. And secondly, can only be sold to to people 18 or over. Well, most of the porn is free today on the internet. So this is about as useless as possible, that law. And by the way, the United States is no better. We are also totally 20 years behind. So where do kids get their porn today? They get their porn from their cell phones and mainly from Snapchat and Instagram. So this is a teen platform that parents think are safe. But guess what? Parents don't know where to look. So what kids do to look for porn on Instagram and Snapchat is they don't put in porn. If you go to your kid's phone and you want to check what they're looking in, you know, you might see they've been looking up homework or something, or some nice emojis. Well, you know what these emojis stand for? Porn. These are the emojis you put in if you want to see penis in vagina porn. These are the emojis you put in if you want to see ejaculation, women's breasts. Did anyone know this? That behind all these emojis on Snapchat and Instagram that your kid is putting in, this is where the porn is hidden. This is how they keep it from parents. This is, again, I can't read the Portuguese, but it doesn't really matter. It's ejaculation on face, this one. Anytime you see teardrops as an emoji, it means ejaculate. This is oral sex. And do I really need to explain what that is? All right, guess what that is. So this is how the kids get their porn. You understand? This is an international language. This is not the United States. This is international. Also, the other way porn is hidden is behind kind of Russian phrases that don't mean anything. The kids know all this, the parents and the teachers don't. So, I went on Instagram, and I just put in those emojis. This is what I got. Now, these are not porn performers. These are girls making porn pictures of themselves. And can you see the cream where she's putting ejaculate on her face, pretending to do that? These are just girls making porn pictures, self-objectification. Now, the porn industry is probably one of the most sophisticated porn industries in the world. So they know how to get into Instagram and Snapchat. So let me give you an example. One of the most well-known porn performers is Sunny Leone. She has on her Instagram account 11.1 million followers. You go onto her Instagram account, you tap on, and within 5 seconds you end up on a hardcore porn site with her being penetrated orally, vaginally, and anally. That's Instagram, and that was all free, didn't cost me anything. Now, where it's even more sophisticated is Snapchat. And this is really interesting what Snapchat has done. You all know what Snapchat is, yes. Now, girls often feel they feel safer to put images on Snapchat because they're meant to disappear in 10 seconds. It's a lie, okay? They don't disappear. You can actually capture them. And what kids are doing is when a girl sends a selfie to a boy, often a nude, they call them nudies, a selfie where she's got no clothes on, he gets it on his phone, and then he gets his iPad or other phone and takes a screenshot. So they never disappear. You are leaving, at 12, 13 years old, a digital footprint that will destroy your life as an adult. Right? Do you know in college campuses today, when the Yales and the Harvards and the Ivies, do you know they look at the digital footprints of the kids that they're interviewing? And many of them turn them down. So think how this is doing to kids as well, upending their lives before they even get to college. So on Snapchat is very clever. So Snapchat has two things. It has the regular Snapchat account, which is free, and then it has Snapchat Premium, where you pay maybe $15 a month. The pornographers have taken over Snapchat Premium. What they've done is they've set up companies, porn companies, that will take porn performers and they set up a Snapchat Premium account. And it is on the premium account that all the porn is. So you go to the regular account, you tap on that, you get to the premium, you pay with a credit card or whatever currency they're using. You then get into premium. Companies have set up, porn companies, and they say that we will set you up with a whole Snapchat Premium, and if Snapchat finds your porn pictures, because you're building a fan base, you understand? So you don't want it to be taken down. So what they promise, these companies, and there's 6 of them out of the porn industry, if Snapchat finds your porn, then what we will do is we will get it back up again within 24 hours. That's the service that they run. They set the whole thing up, and if it gets closed down, they set it back up again. So you don't lose your fans. This is how the porn industry is cannibalizing teen media sites. So what I would say is that Instagram, Snapchat, and other apps are gateways to the porn industry. So let's have a look at some statistics. So the average age of a boy first seeing hardcore porn is 11. Now, when I say that, if I say that in a hospital with nurses or doctors, or I say it to therapists, they tell me no, it's younger. I've got patients addicted to porn, age 9. 9. I was in Poland, and they told me, one of the therapists, he was dealing with a 7-year-old addicted to porn. What they're addicted to, we don't know. The violence, most likely, and the adrenaline. And also, we now are finding that because kids are getting to porn younger and younger, we have a big increase in child-on-child sexual abuse. So there is one hospital in the United States that is keeping data on the increase. Do you know the average age? So this is child-on-child. You've got that sexual abuse. The average age of the girl victim is between 4 years and 8 years. And the average age of the boy rapist is between 8 to 10. Now, how can you call a 10-year-old a rapist? Do you understand? He's a little boy, right? Now, it used to be, if boys of that age were raping girls, you could be sure he was being raped. Now they can't do that. Now they have to figure out, did he see it in porn? Because is he acting out? And in fact, they had a recent case, terrible, of a 11-year-old boy who was watching porn with one hand and had his hand down his sister's diaper, masturbating his sister, who was 18 months old. Right? The cases, and I gave a talk at a conference last month in DC, which was the first ever conference on child sexual abuse. The stories I heard were just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And it's now just becoming to the attention of therapists and also pediatricians in the US what is happening. So, what we know as well, and this should be really, really, really scary, is that porn sites get more visitors each month than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. We're not talking about a small industry here. We are talking about the major form of sex education for boys all over the world. This is their sex ed, okay? This is where they get their information from. Now, I want to talk about as well how I study the porn industry, because I study it in many ways, not just the harms. I study how the industry works. So this is an interview with a pornographer, and in it he says, a lot of people get distracted from the business model by the sex. Pornography, is just as sophisticated and multi-layered as any other marketplace. We operate like any other Fortune 500 company. So first of all, they bring in the best MBAs, the best business scholars, and what's interesting is my husband and I, David is a professor at the business school in Massachusetts. And although pornography is not his area, it is now, and we write about the porn. We are the only two people who write about the business of pornography, because we write from the sociological perspective and we write from the business perspective. So because David is a business professor, he can put it into understanding value chains and supply chains and things that sociologists don't talk about. So we have written a number of articles together about the porn industry. And interestingly, I'm going to talk about a company a bit later that owns most of the porn industry. And we wrote a piece that got picked up by, 16 different Newsweek, Time, everywhere. And we said that this company has a monopoly of distribution of porn. And they wrote to us, right? So they're following us because they know we're exposing them. And they said, please change it to the fact that we do not have a monopoly because we do not own all business sites. We want you to change it. Well, first of all, we can't change it. We've published it. You understand? You don't get to change articles once you've published it. Secondly, David wrote them back a beautiful answer. He said, well, actually, in economics terms, you do have a monopoly. How did you put it? He said it's monopolistic, you dominate, and that in economics means monopoly. But, of course, we did ask them to change it just this once because they're a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry and they didn't want us to sue us, okay? But they are a monopoly. So what's interesting is that company is watching now what we write because we are the only ones who are actually putting the focus on them, and I'm going to talk about them a bit later. Did anyone know that one company owns the majority of the porn industry? Yeah, that's distributed all over the world. No, and I'm going to explain that a bit later. So, let me give you an example of what pornographers do. Pornographers, like all businesses, raise capital, undergo mergers and acquisitions, organize trade shows. They have a lobbying arm called the Free Speech Coalition. They interface with banks, credit card companies, venture capitalists. So let me give you an example of how they are a business. So there is a website called kink.com, which I would argue is a torture porn website. It's where they torture women. To give you an example, what they do is they waterboard women, waterboard them. You know that's illegal. They also electrocute their labia. They put electrodes on their labia. Right? So this is, you watch this and you want to die when you see what they do to these women. But what's interesting when you go onto kink.com is they always have a thing where they do a before and an after. They interview this poor woman who's about to be completely destroyed, and she says, I really, really want to do this. And then they destroy her. She looks like she doesn't know what's hit her. And then 40 minutes later, they have a video saying, oh, I love this. This was great. So has anyone heard of OSHA? O-S-H-A? So OSHA is the the federal government's health and safety, which is a joke when you're talking about pornography, okay? So the OSHA had hearings in California, and the head of OSHA asked the head of kink.com, and they said, is everyone following me clearly, yes? They said to the head of kink.com, why do you do before and an after video? Why don't you just show the porn? Why do you show her saying, I want to do it before, and I loved it after? And you know what he said, the head of kink.com, a torture porn site? He said, when I became the CFO of kink.com, I went to Visa and MasterCard, and I said to them, what can I do for you to process payment for kink.com? And they said, do a before and after video so it looks consensual. So they are following the guidelines of MasterCard and Visa. Do you see how closely the porn industry is working with other major corporations? People find that shocking, that Kink and MasterCard and Visa put in place protocols for torture porn sites? Well, I'm sure you must find it, because when I heard that, and that, by the way, is all documented, and I think it's even on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. So, let's go into who this company is. So if you put porn into Google, most of those sites are owned by MindGeek. MindGeek was started in 2007 by a man called Fabian Thyman, who was a tech specialist. He came in and he bought up a lot of the sites. And what he did, and this is what forever changed it for children, he basically turned the porn sites into what we call tube sites, like YouTube. So he made it free. Who is going to free porn? Those who don't have Visa's MasterCard. Kids. So I would argue a lot of this was to bring kids in to get them early. So Fabian Thyman, at first the organization he founded in Luxembourg, and its main office is now in Montreal, but it owns the vast majority of porn distributed. It owns 9 of the 15 most traveled free porn sites in the world. A few years ago, he was arrested in Brussels, I think it was, for tax evasion. They threw him out of MindGeek. Well, it was called Manwin, and they threw him out, and they now changed the name to MindGeek. This is the Amazon of pornography. Now, isn't it interesting that nobody here has heard of them, am I right? Nobody in the United States have heard of them. Yet, They control probably the world's pornography. They are as important in Brazil as they are in the US, because distribution knows no geographical boundaries. So, just to give you some statistics of how much they control. Right. Now, this is what they boast. From last year, they got Pornhub. Now, Pornhub is just one of their top sites. Remember, they own 9 of the most traveled porn sites. Pornhub is just one, but it is the most popular. So just so you get a sense of how much traffic, 33.5 billion visits in 1 year, 2018. They have an average of 100 million visitors. Daily, 100 million. 962 searches on Pornhub per second. They have uploaded in 1 year 4.79 million new videos, just in 1 year. And they have created over 1 million hours of new content in 1 year. In 1 year. That's already with millions and millions and millions of hours of content already. Pornhub boasts that 100 million daily visits is as if the combined population of Canada, Poland, and Australia visited Pornhub every day. All right, everyone getting a sense of the size of this industry? And who do they have as the target on the back? Who is their perfect consumer? The 11-year-old boy. Okay, this is who they have the target. And you know why? Because as soon as you know what an 11-year-old or a teenage brain looks like, you understand. So, what do we know about the brains of early teenagers? We know that their frontal lobe is not fully developed, that their brains are geared for novelty and risk-taking. Does anyone know at what age the full adult brain is developed? At what age does your brain stop developing? Does anyone know? 17? It's actually 30 now. They found you do not have a full adult brain till 30. That is when your frontal lobe, your executive part of the brain, is fully developed. Anyone who has had kids knows just how crazy 11-year-olds are. That's their job description as a kid. Right? If I had somebody following me around when I was 11, taking pictures of all the mess-ups I made, my life wouldn't look like this. Now with the cell phone, you document every crazy thing that kids do, and you can't get rid of it. Now, they want the kids, Pornhub, because they're wired for novelty, risk-taking, and they're getting sexually interested. This is perfectly normal. All of that is normal. What becomes unhealthy is when the porn industry comes in and hijacks that developmental stage as a way to sell pornography to the children. Do you see that? This is when we get into trouble. In a healthy society, kids would be allowed to go through all the developmental milestones they need to go to become healthy adults. In a porn culture, the pornographers, who also employ psychologists, know exactly what they're after. So, the question is, what are they watching in pornography? And what they're watching, and I'm going to talk about the violence that they see. Excuse me. So the question becomes, what is the kind of imagery that they're watching? So the best study they have is that 90% of the most watched porn has violence against women in them. Okay, what is this violence? So let's talk a little bit about it. So when they did a study to see what are the most popular images on the sex act, they came up with this: gagging, rough anal sex, ejaculation on the face, ATM. Now, what is ATM? ATM stands for ass to mouth. This is where the penis goes into the anus and then into the mouth without washing. And what they're finding, because of this, is that female porn performers have fecal throat infections because they're transmitting the feces from their anus to their mouth. Okay? This is one of the major sex acts. Hair pulling, spitting, choking, all of these things. So I want to give you an example. So when you go on Pornhub or any porn site, you will see literally thousands and thousands and thousands of videos. But it doesn't matter what you click on because you get the same sex acts. So the number one sex act is gagging. So let me explain what this is. This is where the penis goes so far down the throat that she's choking. And she starts to choke. And in fact, if you have any empathy, I start to choke. When I'm watching this, I can feel myself begin to choke. Now, as she's choking, what happens? The male porn performer gets her head and pulls it closer to his penis. So she chokes even more. Her eyes are streaming, and they put on a lot of mascara so that you see the tears running down her. And she is gagging. Sometimes she even throws up, and they keep that in the video. Okay? Now, what's interesting is I don't know if the male porn performer is a psychopath or not. I don't know. I'd have to do a study. But he acts as a psychopath, and that's what's critical. Because when you think about what makes someone human, why don't we all just kill each other? Why? Because we have empathy. Empathy is the most important human quality. I couldn't go up to you and do you harm because I would look in your eyes and I would see your humanity and I would see mine reflected back. So what does it say that a young boy's first sexual experience is watching a man behave as if he's a psychopath? And this is across the board. They all do the same thing. She is crying, she's choking, and he is completely blank. Completely. Which is a psychopathic response to somebody in pain. Then, when I was writing my book, Pornland, and I was watching hours and hours of porn, and it drives you literally insane. And I was thinking to myself, I was thinking a few things. First thing I was thinking about is, thank God my son is older, because he would not be the man he is today if this is what he would have got to when he was younger. He would be a different human being. Secondly, I was thinking if he would have saw this at 11, how could he have stood it? And then the question is, how do 11-year-old boys stand this? These are critical questions. So I started to read what goes with the imagery. And this is what goes with the imagery. I want to give you a little bit of a actual piece. So they bring these images up there. So you've got the woman, she's gagging, she can't breathe. She's got a penis so far down her throat, right? She can't breathe. And the question becomes, why is this boy able to watch this? Why isn't he horrified? So let me tell you what they put, the pornographers. They're very clever. So this is from a site called Gag Me and Then Fuck Me. We at do you know what we say to things like romance and foreplay? We say fuck off. We take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. We make them gag till their makeup starts running. And remember, it's very, very critical. The makeup running is to show that they are gagging. That's critical. Etc. Now, look how clever this is. So let's go here. You've got an 11-year-old boy. He puts porn into Google. What do you think that 11-year-old boy thinks he's going to see? Maybe breasts, if he's lucky. Maybe a vagina. Maybe somebody having sex. Do you think for one moment that 11-year-old boy thinks he's going to be catapulted into a world of sexual violence? Of course he doesn't. right? So the question is, here he is, he's a baby, 11 is like a baby, right? Into watching sexual brutality. So why does he stay on it? Well, this is what they do. They say, and they know exactly how to capture him, they say, we take gorgeous young bitches and do exactly what every man would really like to do. First of all, is that true? Does every man want to do this to a woman? No. Of course they don't. But he's 11. He's got no history of sexual activity. He has no reservoir to draw on to say, you know what? I don't think my last girlfriend wanted this, or I don't think my wife liked this. He's 11. This is his first form of sex education. And you see what they're saying to him? We know you. We know what you want. So I want you to think of that boy and that toxic stew of trauma in his stomach. Because what we are doing is we are traumatizing an entire generation of boys into masturbating to sexual violence. And you know what we call that? Bodily betrayal. Because their body is betraying them, because it is betraying who they are as their moral compass. Because they don't want to watch this. So let me give you another example. So apart from gagging women with a penis, the second major sex act is very, very rough anal sex. So I want to read you the promotional copy from a popular film called, and then they don't hide it, this film is called Anally Ripped Whores. And this is what they write. Again, this is for the boy who reads this. We at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. Chicks being ass-fucked till their sphincters are pink, puffy, and totally blown out. Adult diapers just might be in store for these whores when their work is done. Okay, so let's analyze this again. We at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. No, you don't. He doesn't want this. This 11-year-old boy, in his wildest dreams, did not think he was going to watch a woman being penetrated anally so strongly that she bleeds or that her anus drops out. This is one of the big problems with women who work in the porn industry, is they constantly have to have their anuses sewn back in their body. This 11-year-old boy did not sign up for this, but this is what he gets delivered free. So now I want you to think of this toxic stew of shame, anxiety, horror, self-loathing, and he's masturbated to it. So he thinks, ugh, I'm so disgusting. I find this arousing. Who am I and what am I? He's got nobody to talk to. He's got nobody to say, do you understand what I've just seen? And we also know from the trauma research that the first thing that trauma does is it shuts down the capacity for language. So it means he hasn't even got that part of his brain up and running to put into language to get help from people. And of course you don't talk about this because it's not manly. So I want you to think about what it means to literally, and this is all over the world now, all over the world. In the Cambodian cotton fields, you have got men downloading this porn, raping the women who were working next to them in the cotton fields. It is everywhere, story after story of every country. So I want you to think about this boy with this deep trauma in his stomach. And if he is never going to resolve trauma, because he's not going to tell anybody, what we know from trauma is at the point when you are traumatized, if you do not resolve it, what you do is you replay the trauma again and again and again and again. So how is he going to replay this trauma? What's he going to do? He's going to keep going back to the porn sites. You see how they have built in trauma as part of their business model to get him addicted to porn? He becomes traumatically habituated and addicted to porn. And if you traumatize a generation of boys, you traumatize a generation of girls because they play this porn sex out on the girls. And if you traumatize a generation of boys and a generation of girls, you realize you destroy the culture. This is cultural suicide. That is the only way I can put this. We are going off this cliff. We now have an entire generation of boys who have now been brought up with this. Do you know recently they tried to do a study in the United States in a university to show pornography, and you need a control group, those who've not seen it, to compare it. Do you know they had to cancel the study? They couldn't find enough boys in the control group who had not watched hardcore porn. Now, I can tell you as an academic, when you get money for a study, you don't give it back, right? This is how bad it was, that they had to cancel the study and give the money back because they could not find a control group of enough boys who had not seen pornography. And when I go and lecture in the universities, and I can lecture from anything to 500 to 1,000 students at a time, I have never had a man or boy put his hand up and say, I've not seen this. I've not seen this. This for them, and let me tell you a story. I was invited to give a lecture at the law school, in one of the law schools in England, in New England, in Boston. And the professor was anxious about me coming in. And she kept sending emails to her class saying, Dr. Gail Dines is coming in to give a presentation. We just want to warn you that some of the slides are explicit. And she sent it out again. Anyway, after I'd finished giving the lecture, the women looked, ugh, as you can imagine. And one of the students put his hand up. You know what his first question was? Why did the teacher send out warning emails? This wasn't explicit. These were the images I was showing. And he found these so normalized that they couldn't understand why they'd been warned. Now, just to let you know that I did not make this up on the taxi ride here, there is over 40 years of empirical research, peer-reviewed, in psychology journals, sociology journals, neuroscience journals, medical journals, that backs up everything I am saying. Everything I am saying is scientifically grounded in empirical evidence. This is just a few examples. If I was to give you all the studies, it would be a printout up to here. Now, what do we know of the effects of young boys getting to pornography? We know that the major effects are it limits their capacity for intimacy. They're more likely to rape. They're more likely to be aggressive sexually. They're more likely to perpetuate harassment. They've got increased anxiety and depression, habitual and addictive use, and now what the studies are finding is erectile dysfunction. Okay, so I'm going to give you a study that has been published in a medical journal. Now, I say medical journal because their bar for science is higher than the psychology journals, so it's got to be really highly scientific. So, and sometimes I give statistics where I feel I'm making them up because they're so crazy. So they have been following erectile dysfunction in boys from 15 to 40. And what they had pre-2000, before the internet, the average erectile dysfunction of boys that age to men was 2.3%. And that was usually due to heart disease, obesity. Do you know what the erectile dysfunction is today in boys 15 to 40, 45, men? You ready for this? 33%. 1 in 3 have erectile dysfunction. Can you believe this? I mean, it sounds like I made it up, doesn't it? I feel like I'm making it up. It sounds so ridiculous, right? Who can believe it? 1 in 3. But you know what? I know that because I go on pornography a lot, so I got a lot of spam. So they think I'm a 25-year-old porn addict. That's who they've got their algorithm for me, okay? What do you think all of my spam is for? Erectile dysfunction drugs. I can name you every single erectile dysfunction drug in the world because I get spam for it every single day because that's who they assume I am, a porn addict who's got erectile dysfunction. So, now, the interesting thing is for all the 40 years of research in academia, what is the one thing you will not find that academics are looking at? What is the one thing that is crucially missing. No one is arguing or looking at the way porn is a major driver to trafficked women and children. And I have to say, this drives me crazy, because I go to conferences, anti-trafficking conferences, and they never mention pornography. You cannot talk about trafficking without understanding the pivotal role that pornography plays. And you will never get rid of trafficking until you get rid of pornography. Now, why is this so? Why is pornography so important? Now, it's just beginning that I am being invited to give lectures at anti-trafficking conferences. And in fact, recently at the Carter Institute, from President Jimmy Carter, they had a huge conference on trafficking. And I was invited to speak on pornography. And on the Carter website, they list all the harms to women. And it is the first time a living president has listed on their website pornography as a major harm. So it is beginning to get there. But I was invited to give a keynote because they wanted to talk about pornography. And I have to say, I was asked to give a keynote last year at the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is the top pediatric organization in the United States. Now, when I got the invitation, I thought things have to be bad if they want me to talk about pornography. Things have to be bad. Because I have been on the margins of doing this work for about 15 to 20 years. All of a sudden, I am getting invites to top organizations all over the world, to governments. So people are beginning to realize we are in trouble. So I gave a keynote lecture to the American Academy of Pediatrics, 15,000 pediatricians, their annual conference. And you know what? The first thing I wanted to say to them, and I was nice, so I didn't, is, where the hell have you been? Where have you been? You have been asleep at the wheel for 20 years. And when I was finished, they were like all shocked. And it was like, you should not be shocked. You, if anyone is charged with taking care of kids, is pediatricians. And you don't know this. How could you not know this? You're probably seeing porn addict after porn addict, 12, 13-year-old, and you're missing it again and again and again. So, why is porn a major driver? First of all, pornography is cultural legitimization for the buying and selling of women and children. It normalizes it. Porn makes it very clear that it is acceptable to buy women and children. It is the visual depiction of prostituted sex. Pornography is prostitution with the camera going. That's what it is. It is a false distinction to make between pornography and prostitution. The women in it, the women in pornography are often trafficked into it, although increasingly less, but that happens. And most important, pornography is a way to desensitize men to women and children's pain. Now, also, let's think about this desensitization. And I want you to listen. This is from a study where they interviewed sex buyers. You call them sex buyers here? Johns, right? They interviewed them, and they asked them about what they thought. So this is the connections that men who go to trafficked women make. These were actual men, right? They said, I know porn stars. They enjoy sex on film more than other prostitutes. So you see, they're putting them all in the same, they understand it's the same category. Whenever I want for sex, I style it in the sex movies. So these are often, some of them are not English speakers. We want to follow what we see in porn. In the movies, the girls always agree. But this was in Cambodia, this one. But in Cambodia, the girl who was taken, which means they kidnapped her, was likely to be beaten unless she agreed. We all want to try watching a sex movie that shows gang rape. So what he's saying here is, after watching a gang rape, him and his friends go to trafficked women in order to do that. So they are telling them straight out of their mouths, you're seeing that. Now, what we also know, interestingly, is, did you know the latest statistic is that the Brazilian Federal Police estimate that in this country you have between 250 to 400,000 children being prostituted in resorts and tourist towns, along highways, and in the Amazon mining brothels. So they are taking children to the Amazon mining brothels where men are, and they are selling the children. Nearly 500,000 children. Yes? Sorry? 500,000 now. 500? So this was an old statistic. And I have to say something as well, which I will talk about a bit later. I have only been here 3 days, and I've spent time with Luciana and been discussing it. There is something going on here where you sexualize children way more than we do in the US. Even in the US, which is bad enough. And I'm going to show you some statistics later, but there's something about the sexualization of children that has caught hold in this culture, and it could very well be pushed by the porn industry and the sex industry. But I have even noticed it just looking at the magazines, and I was reading a lot of articles by, in the newspaper. And I want to say one other thing that I was really upset with. I went on Google Scholar. Do people know what Google Scholar is? It's where you look for academic articles, all peer-reviewed. I was really shocked that the ones I could read, I agree they're not all because they were translated into English, but most of the journals are English, who were written by academics, seemed to be pro-trafficking and prostitution. And in fact, they didn't call it sex trafficking of children. You know what they called it? Child sex tourism. What is child sex tourism? It's trafficking of children. These are the academics. Am I wrong that there is a big push here in the academics to legitimize trafficking, and even of children? Another thing they call them, listen to this, youthful sex worker. Now, first of all, there is no such thing as a sex worker. Do you use that term here? Get rid of that term. No woman I have ever spoken to who has exited the porn industry calls herself a sex worker. It is a porn term, it is a sex industry term, it is a pimp term, and women who are in the sex industry, while they're in it, will refer to themselves as sex workers. Why? Number one, they have to, they're working in it. Number two, if they admit to themselves psychologically what is happening, they will collapse. They will not be able to get up the next day and do this. Now, I work with a lot of groups in the United States and all over the world of women who used to be trafficked as children and got out. They hate the term sex worker. They said we were sexual slaves. We were not sex workers. And you understand how that takes away the pain and the violence that you do to women and children. It cleanses it. They are not sex workers, they are sexual slaves. They are not youthful sex workers, they are sexual slaves. And it's certainly not child sex tourism, it is child trafficking, sex trafficking. So these are words matter really importantly. So, let me see what I'm up to with this one. Okay, so that was, got that one. Okay, next one. So why children? Why are children so popular? Because, as I said, the desensitization. And here is a statement from, this is from a pornographer, and they were interviewing him about porn. And he said, one of the things about today's porn, the extreme market, is the fans want much more extreme porn. So let's go back to my 8 men I interviewed in prison, all of whom were porn addicts, were desensitized. Let's think about the 11-year-old boy who's been brought up on hardcore porn. When he eventually starts having sex, what's he going to want? Kissing, cuddling, intimacy. That's like asking a whiskey drinker to go back to beer. It's not going to do it. right? When your whole sexual template and body has been brought up with the thud of sex and violence, you are going to want sex and violence. Now, which is the only group in the world who can't say no? Trafficked women. Because they will be murdered. Trafficked women and children will be, the pimp would rather murder them than let them get away. I presume you all know this. Yeah, they can't afford to let them get away. These girls and women cannot say no. So when these men want hardcore, violent sex, where are they going to go? The only place where the women are going to have to say yes. So let's look at the laws in Brazil. And this is why I want you to think about what happens geographically. The law in Brazil is that in Brazil, porn film actors must be 18 or older. But you know what? The laws in Brazil don't count because you get most of your pornography from the United States. So the question is not what are the laws in Brazil, it's what are the laws in the United States that is producing the pornography that you consume. So let me give you some examples. Ashcroft versus the Free Speech Coalition decision. This is the Supreme Court. In 2002, the Free Speech Coalition went to the Ashcroft Supreme Court and said that the 1997 Child Pornography Protection Act, the 1996 Child Pornography Protection Act, limited the free speech of the pornographers. And you know what that was? That Protection Act in 1996 said that number one, you couldn't use women under 18, and number two, you couldn't use women who looked under 18. The Ashcroft Supreme Court agreed with the Free Speech Coalition and said you can use women who look under 18. That's the laws that you have to deal with, not the laws of Brazil. There's not much production here. The production and distribution is mainly coming from the United States. Now, let me tell you the second law you have to deal with, which is just going to open the doors to child pornography, and it's going to be legal. There is a law, which is now, I think, 15 years old, called 2257 in the United States. Now, what that law requires, very simply, is that you have to keep documentation on the porn set that everyone in that porn movie is 18 or above. Reasonable? Perfectly reasonable. You just take a picture of a driver's license. No. The porn industry has been fighting that for 15 years, millions of dollars. 4 years ago, I get a call from the US Department of Justice, and they say that the porn industry is once again trying to overthrow 2257. Will I be the expert witness for the Department of Justice? This is one before the Supreme Court. This is going to the Supreme Court. So I was at the Third Circuit. They said, we're going to ask you to do in 6 weeks, 6 months of work to prepare the report and to testify. So they gave me the report that the porn industry had written, which was by a professor from UCLA called Daniel Lins, who interestingly, 30 years ago was one of the first professors to say pornography has a negative effect. He soon changed his mind and he's now working for the porn industry. And he argued that teen porn and young-looking porn was something like 0.03%, very, very small. So what we did is that I said to the Department of Justice said, we need to write about what's going on and you need to do the statistical work. And I said, I'm not a statistician, but my husband is. So we together wrote the report for the Department of Justice. And David, my husband, destroyed the pornographer's report to the fact that we employed search engine optimizers. We got into the back end of Pornhub, and what we found is that teen porn and very young-looking porn was the most searched terms in the world. In the world. Am I right, David? It was the world? Yes, in the world. Our report so destroyed the pornographer's report that the judge threw their report out. Do you know how often that happens? Never. So we got his report thrown out. We won, okay? I think I was the only person who testified. We won. the Department of Justice. Last year, the same judge overturned it, and now the new law is that distributors do not have to keep 2257. This opens the door for now child pornography. When I saw that, it's not often, I've got a strong stomach. It's not often I sit and weep all day, right? It was unbelievable. And there was no stories about it in the media. We wrote a story, again, for this other place that got picked up. Now, when I write an op-ed, I get normally 15 to 20 interviews from different media. Not one. This has been kept completely quiet in the United States of America. Now, why should you be worried in Brazil? Because the law 2257 now means that Brazilian men and boys are going to be looking at porn with very young looking. Now, let me just show you some of these images. This is legal. These are legal. First time with daddy. Daddy's little whore. There's a whole section called incest. Do you know you can go on and just put in incest and up this comes? These are the most searched for terms. It's okay, she's my stepdaughter. Do you know how at risk stepdaughters are? Now, I went onto Pornhub in Brazil to see what were the most searched terms in Brazil. And did you know that in Brazil, the most searched terms on Pornhub, these are the most searched terms. 11 of the top 20 search terms have something to do with either school children, teachers, or young kids. Now, there's one of them called amateur. You've heard of amateur porn? Amateur porn is not amateur. It's the porn industry making it look like it's amateur. They use very young-looking girls. MILF, that stands for Mothers I Like to Fuck. Now, if you watch a MILF film, a lot of it is the mother handing over her daughter to her boyfriend or husband. So of the top search terms in Brazil, in porn, this is what you got. So the question is, how are you going to deal with the sex trafficking of children when you're bringing up a whole generation of boys watching this? What is the next generation going to look like? You say 500,000 kids are being sex trafficked in Brazil? Wait till this generation grows up and they want kids. You're going to see that number, just as we're seeing every number in the United States, go up and up and up. Because this is what the culture is doing. It is getting hold of our kids and changing them. So, by the way, I also found this, that did you know in Sao Paulo, now these are international child porn rings. And the last biggest child porn ring, international, was actually out of Sao Paulo. And they arrested 250 people. That was last May. Now, a child porn ring is very interesting. To join a child porn ring, it's on, you all heard of the dark web? The dark web? It's on the dark web. You don't join with money. You don't buy your way into it with money. You know how you buy your way into a child porn ring? And this is terrible. You buy your way in, on average, which you have to upload 10,000 pictures of child porn. That is the end. That's the fee to get into a child porn ring. Now, I was in London a few years ago, and there was another child porn ring, international, had just been busted. And I was speaking with someone from Interpol. And he said in his life he had never seen a child porn ring that had just been busted. You know why? He said this one that had been busted had a bronze, a silver, and gold membership. And the gold membership was that you, the member, had to be raping the child in the picture. That's how you got gold membership. So everything is getting worse. You understand? It's all getting worse and worse. So MindGeek is behind a lot of this, in not the child porn rings, but he's behind a lot of the younger. And so the question becomes, what are we going to do? How are we going to clean up this toxic culture? Because we've got to do something. And I know you're working very hard here, working against trafficking. We're having tomorrow a meeting for those who are interested in working against pornography, and if you could mention in the Q&A where it is, that would be great. For those of you who want to start an anti-porn organization and join to anti-trafficking. So, oops, wrong thing. So the question is, what are we going to do? We're going to do the Gulliver strategy. You tie the monster down piece by piece. There is not one solution to this. We throw every single thing we have at this, everything. And I'm going to show you what other countries are doing. So we're going to go and look around what other countries are doing. So the first thing is, get my glasses back on. In the Nordic countries, I've been working a lot in Sweden, Iceland, and Norway. The reason is they have the best anti-trafficking laws in the world. It is called the Nordic model. It was passed in 1999 in Sweden. It is now in Norway, Iceland, France passed it, Spain is going to pass it, it looks like. It's sweeping everywhere. You need to pass it in Brazil. What it does is it criminalizes the Johns, it criminalizes the pimps, and it decriminalizes the women. Because the women are victims. They should not be treated, the women and children should not be treated as criminals. They need to be given safe housing, they need to be given job skills, they need to be given parents if they don't have parents. You know what they do in the United States? They lock them sometimes in prison. These women have been raped and these children over and over again, and they end up in a prison cell. And they end up with a record. Now, if you have a prison record, you realize you're never going to get a job. So you're just going to push them right back into the sex industry. So the Nordic model has swept everywhere. And when I was in Iceland, I was invited by the Minister of the Interior in Iceland to go to Iceland to help them develop an anti-porn law. And the law was going to be this. The law was going to be that in Iceland they have a constitution that says women and men are equal. And they were going to argue that pornography is against the Constitution because it undermines the civil rights of women. Isn't that wonderful? That you can't have equality with pornography. If men are looking at hardcore porn, you're undermining the civil rights of women. Anyway, sadly, just before they passed it, they got voted out. However, they've still got the Nordic model, and they're looking at tying on anti-porn legislation to the Nordic model as filmed prostitution. Now, the act that is going to change the world this is the act which is coming into the UK in 2019. And I have done a lot of lectures all over the world with the people who wrote this, because I was there at the beginning when it was called something else, and then it developed into this. So we were in Poland, we were in Canada. Let me explain what this is. This is going to seriously change children's access. The whole act was called the Digital Economy Act, but this bit is the age verification. So, you know, if you go onto a porn site, it says, tick here if you're 18. What kid is not going to tick, I'm 18, right? What this requires is you go to a third-party age verifier with official documents of a birth certificate. You have to get age verified. You get a digital chip, and every single porn site that you want to go on has to upload, it might be a digital chip, they're not sure yet, but they have to have that third-party age verifier. If the porn site is in violation, they get dropped at the internet provider level. Secondly, all their payment services are withdrawn. And thirdly, they're pretty much closed down. This is coming in July. This is going to, once this happens, they're going to be looking at it in Canada, France, I was recently in Germany, they're looking at it there. I'm going back to Sweden in September because they're looking at it there. This will fly everywhere, this age verification. They just want to see what the hiccups are before they start bringing it into, and there will be hiccups, but this is the most effective piece of legislation that has ever, in fact, you know what? This is the first piece of regulation ever against the porn industry. It is the most unregulated industry in the world. Now, I live in the United States of America. Completely useless. We will never, ever get the age verification in America passed. No way. So it's not even worth it at this moment. So what happened 3 years ago is that I gave a lecture, and I was speaking in a lecture to women philanthropists. And they came up to me at the end, and they said, "We want to give you money. Quite a bit of money. What will you do?" And so I pulled together, I just want to show you who I pulled together. Actually, I pulled together the top people in the country. Holly Atkinson, who is a physician at Mount Sinai, and who was a founder of Physician for Human Rights. Sharon Cooper, who is the most famous forensic pediatrician in the United States. Heather Forkay, Sharon Lamb, who was the lead author on the American Psychological Association report on the effects on children. Don Hilton, who is the lead neuroscientist in America studying the impact of pornography on the adolescent brain. We brought in all these people, and we sat down and we said, what can we do? We have this money. What is the best way to spend it? And it was clear, because what we did is we took a public health approach. And in public health, it says very clearly that the best way to bring up healthy children is to have educated and skilled parents. And yet, we have parents who know nothing about pornography. So what we decided to do was build an online program for parents so that they could build resilience and resistance in their kids to porn. You got this? You educate the parents so they can educate their kids. So, 3 years later, 2.5 years later, we have launched our parents program. It is for parents of tweens, parents of kids 9 to 12. Now, let me tell you, when we got this money, and I have to say, to my sadness, I gave up my professorship at the university because I couldn't do both. But this was my destiny. You understand? This is my destiny. I have done this work for 25 years. I had to leave something bigger than me behind, an organization. So I miss my students, I miss so much, but I walked away from a full professor position, and I became the CEO and president of Culture Reframed. We are the only organization in the world that builds programs for parents. When we first started, my thought was, I know what I'll do. I'll just look at all the other programs and make ours better, because we've got all this money. And to my absolute horror, there was not one, and I mean horror, because how do you even start? You know what it felt like? It felt like building a jigsaw puzzle with no picture at the end. So we combed the world for the top people. And we ended up, our head of health programs is in Australia, another one is in England. We ended up with the top people all over. And 2 years later, we have a 13-module, 20-hour program. You can go in for 5 minutes, 5 hours. And so the question is, what do parents want to do? They need something, they need help. And they don't know what to do. Should they phone a friend? Yes, but she's useless because she knows nothing as well. So this is why we decided. So this is our program. 13 modules. Introduces parents to, so first let me say you go onto culturereframed.org. We've got a whole website just on culturereframed.org about pornography. We've got an academic library. We've got videos. Then you hit on the parents program. You just have to sign up. Now, we made a political decision. We said we are going to make this program free. So that meant we had to fundraise for every single penny because we had no income stream. But we said we don't just want parents with money able to go on this. We want every parent to have access to this because every kid deserves this knowledge. So we absolutely agreed with that. That was a political decision, but it means that we had to go around fundraising. You go onto the parents program for free, and then we walk you through 13 modules which explain what is happening to your kid. It explains where your child is at emotionally, cognitively, sexually. This is for 9 to 13-year-olds. What is the natural, normal developmental stones? We have discussions around boundaries, bodily consent, how to talk to you, because this is all for parents, how to talk to your kids. And I'm not going to spend much time on this because you can all go home right now, go on culturereframed.org and go on the parents program and go through it. But what we're doing is we are educating the parents. So once we've first of all educated them, this is where your kid is at developmentally. Now let's explain the harm that pornography and hypersexualization does. So we have these other modules, and then we have conversation strategies. By the way, we have embedded videos that you can sit and watch with your kid and discuss. This is now being translated into Swedish. It's being translated into German. It's being translated into Hebrew. It's being translated into, somebody mentioned Portuguese. We're working with people in Spain. This is now everywhere. And in Sweden, they're going to build it into the school curriculum. Although it's for parents, it is so robust and so well built by specialists that everyone had a sort of, either a PhD or an MD, that it's now being used by doctors as well. So the last bit is conversations. Because really, if you go home and you speak to your 12-year-old about pornography, you understand they would rather be anywhere in the world but talking to you. You know that. So we explain, for example, when you're speaking to a boy about something important, you never look them in the eye. Go on a car trip. Go on a bike trip. Studies show that boys do much better never looking you in the eye. We explain how to set the tone for the conversation. Do not lecture. Do not preach to them. You have to help them navigate their way through. And then the last bit are we scripted out all the conversations. Now, why did we script out the conversations? This time last year, just before we were about to go public with this, I was all over LA speaking to parents. And I said, we're going to bullet point out the conversations. And all the parents jumped up and said, don't bullet point, script it out. Tell us what to say, word for word. So we went back to our parent educator and said, you need to script them all out. Now, you see here 10 conversations. Each conversation has a second one attached because we assume it probably won't go well. So we help with it to bring it back if it's not going well. We've even developed a contract that you can have with your kid about your mobile phone. When your kid gets the cell phone, this is a contract that you work through with your kid about what are the boundaries. Now, we say the kid will break the contract. That's the job description of a kid. You understand that? Do not take the phone away. You use that as a teachable moment of how to explain about digital safety. It's all in there. So, basically, what we say here is that our next program, which we have just got a grant for, which will partially fund our program, is for parents of teens. Because now we want to speak to parents who have kids 14 to 18. It's a whole different set of consultants because now they need to specialize in teens, middle adolescents. So we're now in the process of interviewing consultants. We have about 6 of them ready to go, because this is written by about 8 people, all specialists in the field, the neuroscience field, the adolescent sex education field, and then we pull it together into a very, very accessible one. So we just got a grant to start our Parents of Teens program. And basically what we say is that you have to speak to your kids about porn, because if you don't, the porn industry will. And you better be the people who speak to them first, rather than the porn industry. So what I'm going to say at the end, coming all this way from Brazil, from America to Brazil, on a 10-hour flight, which was very nice, I might add, is to say this. I do this because this is a public health crisis that we will not survive if we don't stop. We cannot have a sustainable culture. You cannot stop trafficking. You cannot stop the abuse of kids, the abuse of women. And when you abuse women and you abuse kids and you blow up the culture, the family, this is not a sustainable way to live. And too few people know about it. Now, I know I've thrown an enormous amount at you in this time. I understand that. And there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. But why I come mainly is to raise awareness. This is what we do at Culture Reframed. If you can believe this, we are the only group in the United States that is anti-pornography and is not either funded by the Christian Church or the Mormon Church. The only group, right? We are a non-faith-based, science-based organization. It's crazy. How is it possible that we're the only group? I thought we would have a ton of competition out there. There is nobody else. And in fact, because there's nobody else, we are now an international group. So I want to end by saying, I know this is very difficult stuff that I have given you. I know that. And I was on a Canadian radio station after my book came out. And the interviewer said to me, Gail Dines, are you not pushing a boulder up a hill? And I said, of course I'm pushing a boulder up a hill. But that's what you do to make the world livable. That's what life is about. You push boulders up hills so you make the world livable. That's how you live a life of morality. That's how you live a life of social change. That's how you give back for everything that was given to you. And I want to say at the end, at some point in the world, in the future, a young person will come up to you and they will say, where were you when all this was happening? What did you do to stop this? And there's two answers. One is, I'm sorry, I didn't do anything. The other one is, I fought with everything I have. I fought with every last bit of energy so that I would create a society that would give you a wonderful, joyful life. I fought with everything because you are worth it. Because that kid and that kid and that kid is all of our kids. My kid is your kid is my kid. And you know what? If instead of saying, I fought with everything, and we change the I to the we, and we say we fought with everything, you know what our last sentence will be? We won. We won. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, please sit down, thank you. So now it's the Q&A, and I get to sit down.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, thank you very much.
Thank you for the inspiring speech today. Now you are, please.
Oh, I've got to go.
Agora a gente vai endereçar algumas questões para Gail. Você quer? Não estou ouvindo.
I can hear you, I can hear you.
Ok. Não, você pode fazer por escrito as perguntas, por favor. Ah, por escrito. Aí tem alguém que vai fazer e eu vou retransmitir as perguntas para ela, tá?
Alô?
Tem as pessoas, as ajudantes de palco estão recolhendo já as perguntas. Eu já tenho algumas aqui e a gente vai começar agora. A gente vai ter meia hora para responder. A Gail vai responder as perguntas. Ok. O senhor Eli
In Yiddish
começa.
there is the word tachlis.
Sorry?
In Yiddish there is the word tachlis.
Tachlis.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like you to ask every one of us, especially the director. Eu gostaria que a senhora pegasse compromisso de todos nós, um por um, especialmente o diretor da Folha, para a gente fazer o máximo de trabalho que a gente puder fazer para ajudar esse trabalho. Não adianta só escutar coisas bonitas, temos que ser empíricos. Então, por favor, cobrar da plateia coisas concretas. E promessas para serem feitas, especialmente da Folha, que está aqui à minha frente o chefão.
Absolutely. Right? Everyone committed?
Yes.
Right.
What is going to do?
Okay.
Sim, pode contar comigo.
What?
Vamos continuar fazendo seminários, vamos colocar em praça pública, como eu disse, toda essa discussão, e acredito que esse é o caminho dentro de um regime democrático, de ouvir todo mundo, criar um certo consenso em relação a determinadas situações e circunstâncias, e, com isso, seguir em frente.
Okay, Gail, I'll be addressing the questions from the audience.
Can I
that
answer
have.
that
Okay,
quickly?
please.
You're exactly right, and I want to say why this is important. Because when eventually you want to bring in regulation, and that's down the road, what they did in the UK was very smart. Before they brought in regulation, they had a report sponsored by the government to look into the impact of porn on children. They then spent 2 years, it was out in all the newspapers, so that by the time they brought in the age verification legislation, everybody understood why it was important. You can't do laws from the top down. You have to educate people so they understand eventually, of course we need this law. So I completely agree with you.
Okay. We must talk about pornography now. Continue to talk. Agora, the first question. A primeira pergunta é como você vê a pornografia voltada para mulheres como em filmes como 50 Tons de Cinza. Você escreveu um artigo para o Guardian falando que não sejamos tolas de acreditar nesse soft porn, né? Eu queria que você falasse um pouco sobre essa categoria, o que você pensa sobre isso.
Okay, so 50 Shades of Grey was not softcore. It was really hardcore. Did anyone in this room read 50 Shades of Grey? Okay, he tortures her. He basically tortures her. And what is very interesting is that, obviously, this book sold more than Harry Potter. That's how popular it was. It was she was supposed to be about 21. He was in his 30s. In fact, she had the developmental level of about a 12-year-old, so it was really about pedophilia. And I would say it's a sad fact of how women buy in to their own oppression and how women have to stand up and develop a movement that refuses to collaborate with those who want to oppress us.
Ok, uma segunda questão é como podemos combater aumentar a conscientização das pessoas para que a produção de vídeos e fotos pornográficas feitas pelas próprias famílias, pelos próprios pais. Aqui a gente está falando de crime e isso começando dentro da própria família.
Well, no, you mean the actual production? I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
Families.
We need to close down production.
Yeah.
Right, we don't want a porn industry.
But the
it's like saying, how did we make slavery more fair to the slaves? You can't. It's a bankrupt industry that is based on the oppression of women and children, and there is no way we can make this an acceptable industry. So our goal, ultimately, is to make pornography history.
Aqui tem outra questão, que é como as mulheres, né, na academia e também as ativistas podem fazer com que esse debate se amplie, né? Elas são muito questionadas, é uma dificuldade fazer com que esse debate vá além, saia além das bolhas, né? Como fazer com que esse debate ganhe amplitude?
Okay, well, one of the things, we're having this meeting tomorrow, and is Luciana here? Do you mention where the meeting is tomorrow?
The civic co-working, yeah.
At 11 a.m. Right, so for people who are interested in figuring out how to start an anti-porn movement in this country, that's what we're going to be discussing, an informal discussion. It takes thinking through how you're going to build a movement, a non-profit movement, how you're going to get help financially, what you're going to do around education, what you're going to do around activism. I mean, this is a huge industry we are taking on, and I am happy to give all of my experience of doing this for 25 years tomorrow to the way in which it works. But one of the things we suggest you do is you start, if those of you who have kids in school, bring it in to, do you have parent-teachers associations here where you lecture? Do you have those? Yes. Right, so for example, you go to the Parent-Teacher Association and you say, I want to bring up the issue of pornography in the next meeting, and is there anyone in this country who studies pornography who could speak for you? Do you have people? No, okay, so you don't. So what you could do is you could show my TED Talk. That could be the point of discussion, is the TED Talk, and actually we need to get it translated into Portuguese. It's only 13 minutes, and it's a great way to start. The other thing to do is the Culture Reframe program. We allow people to download it for free. You pick sections and you use them as discussion groups. One of the goals of Culture Reframed was to give you the ability to actually tailor it to your organization. So what we say is download whatever bits you want. You can cut it to pieces, give what you think people want to hear, and this is used as an educational tool. You have to start being very creative. And also, the newspaper that we were just speaking about, you've got to get to the media. The media have to follow this, and there is a documentary coming out. Do we want to talk about the documentary?
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the documentary?
Please. Luciana,
do we
about the
because
documentary.
people are asking about education. So my question is, do you want to mention the documentary that's coming out? Okay, why don't you talk about that? Or whoever. I don't know what's happening.
Another panel, and the next panel you can talk about it. Okay, thank you. I have another question about the vulnerability. As pessoas, você tem um quadro também aqui no Brasil de abuso sexual e a exploração sexual está ligada à vulnerabilidade social, né? Como que isso também se traduz dentro da indústria da pornografia? Como que isso pode ser usado e é um problema também que a gente deve olhar?
Well, that's exactly the same all over the world. That the more poverty you have, the more you have desperate women. Oh, sorry. The more poverty you have, the more desperate you have women and children, which means you have a much bigger population to draw from to drag into the porn and sex industry. The truth is, one of the real solutions is that people have to have choices other than pornography and prostitution in order to make a living. As long as you've got poverty, you will also always have a sex industry. Now, I understand you're not going to get rid of poverty overnight. So one of the things that you should think about is what are the ways that you can start talking about pornography and the sex industry in ways that will make men think twice before they go to trafficked women and children. And that is going to take a mass education. For example, in Sweden, where they passed the legislation, the Nordic model against trafficking, they start educating kids as young as 4 in kindergarten about why you shouldn't buy sex. Now, obviously, they don't talk about prostitution. They do what's called scaffolding. So they talk about bodily boundaries. They talk about ownership of bodies. And then as the kids grow up, you continue to scaffold that curriculum. And in fact, it's so successful that the Swedish businessmen who travel abroad often when they go to places like India or I think Brazil they mention, when they've done a business deal, they end up going to a brothel. And the Swedish businessmen felt uncomfortable. So what they did is they went to the Swedish government and they said, will you write a law that says it is illegal for us to go to a brothel inside or outside of Sweden? You see the impact that education has? This was asked by men of the Swedish government.
Por falar em impacto da educação, né, qual o papel da escola? Você falou muito das famílias, mas como os professores podem se engajar? E qual que é o papel da escola, separando e o da família? Como começar esse discurso e fazer com que essa coisa seja... que a comunidade também se envolva, né, no combate à pornografia?
Right, absolutely crucial. The schools should be at the forefront of this. Now, this is easier said than done. First of all, for example, in the UK, they have brought in mandatory sex and relationship education. And I don't think it shouldn't just be called sex education, it needs to be sex and relationship education, or I would call it sex, relationship, and intimacy education. Now, they've made it mandatory in the UK, and I was there last July, and I met with the bodies, the main organisational bodies, who were involved in bringing this in and making sure it was being carried out. What they told me is there's no curriculum and no training and no teacher knows what to do. And it was mandatory. So what I'm saying is you have to start training teachers. You have to build curriculum. We've got plenty of curriculum on our website that you can use. And then what we used to do at my college every summer was we would have an institute and we would train teachers to teach this kind of stuff in schools, and we would split the teachers up from middle school and high school, so 9 to 12, and then 13 to 18, and we would run a week-long institute, and teachers would come from all over. They came from Norway, they came from Sweden, they came from Australia, and we would train them how to do that. Culture Reframed is willing to train teachers in Brazil. We've got curriculum, we can help you, and of course our job would be to train teachers here so that you can train the teachers, because obviously we can't come every minute from the United States. What we can do is help set you up with training materials, manuals, and that you can use in the schools, and then that needs to be put into teacher training colleges and become part of the curriculum in schools and in teacher training colleges.
Eu tenho várias perguntas aqui interessantes, eu vou tentar agora fazer algumas para você poder responder um pouco mais perguntas. Como você enxerga a produção e a criação de vídeos pornográficos feitos e pensados para mulheres?
All three of them. Let me say, the porn industry would love everyone to think that women are looking at porn. Right? The porn industry, like all industries, wants to maximize its consumer base. First of all, it is a very small number. Let's be very clear. There is this thing that is called feminist porn. It's not feminist, it's pornography. You can't have feminist porn in the same sentence. You're either a feminist or you're a pornographer. You can't be both. And people often use the example of lesbian porn. Lesbian porn is made by the porn industry for men, okay? Not for lesbians. And let me say, when people say, well, what about images of just people having sex? If you were to really take a video of people having sex that wasn't pornographic and wasn't violent, just people having sex, you know what? You'd fall asleep in the middle from boredom. And the best thing about sex is having it, not watching it, right? Enjoy sex, have fun sex, have creative sex. But why watch somebody else have it? And do you have the right to be so intimate and so connected with somebody you've never met, you don't know their name, you don't know their history, you don't know anything about them, and yet you have the right to be a voyeur at their most intimate, vulnerable moments? I would argue no, that we do not want to bring up a country or a society or a world of voyeurs. We want to bring up people who have healthy, fun, creative sexuality. If you're looking for that, you can't have pornography alongside it.
Okay, acho que ela respondeu aqui várias perguntas que vinham nesse sentido, e eu vou mudar um pouco do foco e queria saber o que você tem visto, né, como ativista, o papel das Nações Unidas, dos organismos internacionais. É um problema que vai além de fronteiras, e como é que você vê que como está essa articulação para enfrentar esse problema que é global?
The UN is useless, okay? They will not talk about pornography. At the moment, there's even big fights going on around trafficking. The UN wants to use the word sex worker, not trafficked or prostituted woman. So there is big arguments going on between exited women from the sex industry, trying to get the UN to recognize the violence of prostitution and trafficking. They haven't even gotten to pornography. I do think that major medical organizations, educational organizations, all of these bodies need to be mandated to take on the issue of porn as a public health crisis in ways that make sense for them. So in education, it's teaching teachers to teach kids about healthy sexuality. In the medical profession, it's teaching doctors and nurses to understand the violence of pornography, to understand the injuries they're seeing, to check in when they have their visits with their kids, that their kids, if they're viewing porn, to explain what the impact of porn is, and also to bring in the parents as well and the community. So I think it's very, very important. And the government should play a role. But I come from the United States, where at the moment it is barely a functioning government, which is not playing any role in this. And I understand in many countries it is very hard to get the government to play a role in this. So you know what? If the government won't play a role, then we do it. We do it. And we have done this before. We were the first people to say there is a climate change crisis. It wasn't the government who came out with that. It was activists who says there's climate change going on and we are going to have terrible consequences from this. So never underestimate the power of movements. They are, indeed, the things that change the world.
Estão curiosos para saber se você já sofreu ameaças. É um tema, você está ferindo interesses grandes, é uma indústria que você está confrontando.
All the
que
time.
Tipo de ameaças?
I have death threats a lot. I have stalkers. All women who speak out, feminists especially, have internet stalkers. So mine's quite funny to just lighten the mood a bit. So I have one, I'm not going to mention his name because it's being taped. I don't want to give him any oxygen. So this guy has made 60 videos on YouTube about me. So first of all, he needs to get a life, right? And what was interesting, he is such a stalker that when I was on the BBC World Service and I was being interviewed about pornography, now this is the BBC World Service all over the world. Can you imagine how many millions of people are listening to this? The first question directed at me came from him. How he got to be the first person to ask a question, I have no idea. So I didn't say anything, and I answered the question. The second question was him. So at this point, I turned to the person asking the question. I said, how many millions of people are listening to this? And you're asking the same question from the same person. This doesn't make any sense. And I said, this is, and I'm not going to give his name because I don't want to give him any oxygen. I said, this man's name is, people should know who are listening that he stalks me all over the internet. I said, he probably lives in his mother's basement masturbating to pornography all day. I go home, takes me about an hour to get home. By the time I get home, he's made a video of where he lives to show he doesn't live in his mother's basement and uploaded it onto YouTube.
Nós temos aqui...
That's how crazy he is.
Temos aqui, olha, até uma pergunta que fala, que a Miley Cyrus diz que o Me Too Movement infantiliza a mulher, né? O que o novo feminismo coloca a mulher como vítima. O que você pensa sobre isso, o movimento Me Too? E eu também queria emendar com outra pergunta.
I'm sorry, explain that again.
A
Yeah.
Me Too movement.
The Me Too.
Me
No,
Too.
absolutely. Speaking out is your first claim to empowerment. To say this happened to me and it was wrong and I was violated and that this man should pay a price for this is the opposite of infantilization. It is what you need to be a survivor, empowered, and to say to the world, I matter, she matters, we matter. Absolutely. I think the Me Too movement is the best thing that's happened to women. And you know what? It'll be the best thing that's happened to men as well in the end. Because they will also figure out ways in which they treat women, not just with respect, but as equals as well. And I understand for many in the Me Too movement, it's like, we don't know what to say or what we do now. We're nervous. And my advice would be, treat us as if we were men. You wouldn't say if you're straight, to the guy you're working with, oh, you look really hot in those pants today, would you? Well, don't say it to us either. Very simple. Treat us as equals because we are your equal.
Perfeito. No Brasil, agora, nós temos uma polêmica sobre a ideologia de gênero, ser ensinado ou não nas escolas. Um governo que chega com uma pauta nesse sentido, né? Que nenhum tipo de educação sexual seja dado nas escolas, né? O que você pensa sobre esse tipo de posicionamento das autoridades?
Okay, so there's a bit of confusion here in the translation because this happened during the conversation when I was in. When you say gender ideology, are we talking about homosexuality? Because that was there was a sort of crossover, and so what exactly are we talking about? What is gender ideology?
Sexual
what do you mean?
education in the schools. Anything. All things in the school.
No, you've... It's going to turn the kid what?
Yeah.
Gay. Yeah. You're going to turn a kid gay through sex education? Well, I'd like to see some evidence on that. I don't think you're going to get much empirical evidence on that. First of all I can say is if you don't have sex education, it is the best gift you can give to the porn industry, right? Because if you don't have good, robust, healthy sex education, the kids are naturally curious. They're becoming sexual, they're growing into a sexuality. So I would say what you want to do is to give them sex education, and not just sex education that's going to scare them about STDs and about all the things, but about pleasure as they get older. We often forget to even mention, you know what? Sex is pleasurable. And often in sex education, it's all fear, fear, fear. But you want to give them the names to call their genitalia so they know they've got the names. You want to give them the vocabulary so that if anything happens to them, they can tell people. And you want to destigmatize it so that they can speak the truth about their lives. Also, if you're going to have kids who are developing different types of sexualities, you want to give them information. I often get asked by, especially gay men organizations, that gay pornography is very important because it's the first time a gay male, they don't usually say this about lesbians, which is interesting, but they say a gay male saw himself as gay. And I say, you know what? You really want to leave it up to the pornographers to teach gay boys on how to be gay? You don't think you can do better than that? Right? If a boy is gay, you don't think you can give him good, healthy sex ed? You're going to hand it over to the perpetrators and the predators of the porn industry? So I do not see that. I absolutely endorse healthy, but age-appropriate sex education. It's got to be age-appropriate. And the truth is, you don't want kids engaging in early sex. They're not ready for it. They haven't got the bodily knowledge about boundaries and integrity. And when I look back at my own life and think about and I was brought up in a kind of very small Jewish community. So we were shielded a lot from it. And when I look back, I realized I had the best of everything. We were allowed to develop sexually with peers in a way that made sense to us. We did not have the porn industry. We did not have any of these telling us what we should or shouldn't do or how we should behave. We were allowed to develop an authentic sexuality, and I would argue that every human being has the right to be the author of their own sexuality, not the porn industry.
Nosso tempo acabou, nós temos muitas perguntas aqui, muita coisa interessante para falar, mas a gente está falando de cultura e eu queria que você encerrasse com uma questão que tem questões culturais muito próprias também do Brasil. A gente está envolto em alguma cultura, por exemplo, do funk nas favelas, né? Como que você viu isso, né? As próprias adolescentes que dançando e se colocando, e isso para você também faz parte dessa cultura porn? Como que a gente...
Yeah, no, there's no way that you can live in a porn culture and not be impacted by the images you see. I did see yesterday some images from funk culture and the images, and the hypersexualization of the girls took my breath away. And that's someone who lives in America, so that's saying something. And what I think is it's often sold as girls owning their own sexuality. You know what? If this was so great, and if being hypersexualized at an early age was so empowering for girls, then I think boys and men would be doing it, and they're not. And I always used to say to my students, if men think it's a good idea for girls to do something, but they're not doing it, always be suspicious. If it's good for us, why isn't it good for them, okay? And I would argue, I absolutely think we need a healthy sexuality. Did what I see from the funk videos suggest an authentic? No. What I saw was an industrialized, plasticized sexuality that came through the porn industry and that represented what these kids have seen from a young age. So no, I think porn is everywhere and we need to depornify our society so our kids can go off and create who they are sexually.
Obrigado, Gail. Mais uma vez, a gente tem muitas perguntas aqui, acho que a gente vai ter o caderno especial também, que a gente vai trazer mais do pensamento da Gail. E muito obrigado por essa aula aqui, por essa fala tão inspiradora.